don't miss, folks. He does not miss whatsoever. Oh my gosh. He don't miss, folks. He does not miss whatsoever.
Hello and welcome. I am the Letter Hack, and with me now is a very special guest, writer of the original graphic novels Buzzing, Side Quest, The Silent End, who also adapted the graphic novels for Academy Award nominated films Wolf Walkers, Song of the Sea, and The Secret of the Kells, as well as co-author of A Kid's Guide to Anime and Manga, the Essential Anime Guide, 50 Iconic Film Standout Series and Cult Masterpieces, and here tonight to discuss his new book in collaboration with artist Girihiru. I'm trying my best with the pronunciations tonight. Please forgive me or offer assistance as needed. Unico Awakening. It's Samuel Staton. Samuel, thank you for being here. How are you?
So nice to meet you, Matthew. It's great to be here. And it's such a hard name to pronounce, Gurihiru, because of the fact that the I think it's the two I's, the I's and the I and the H that run up against each other. It's just a really difficult name to pronounce. So you're not the only one. There are a lot of people who have a hard time.
Well, and it's my
first get. It takes a few times to say it, like Gurihiru. Yeah.
And I mean, I've said it before.
Yeah.
I've talked about their other books. It's just
Sure.
I'm like Western American suburban kid who's just destined to say things wrong, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
And
me too. Yeah, absolutely.
But we're gonna get through it one way or another. Look, thank you for being here. It's a real treat for me. You seem to be an incredibly busy writer, but it also seems you are more than likely creating and writing about the things that you love. Is that true? Are you doing something in relation to comics, manga, anime, pretty much around the clock, whether for work or for pleasure?
Well, yeah. I mean, I like to joke that it's kind of like 12-year-old me would be very would have his mind blown, would have no idea what wouldn't believe it if he was told that this is what he would become. Yeah, no, like especially now, between everything that I've kind of been working at over the last good decade, 12 years has culminated in me actually being able to spend a lot of time doing the things and writing about the things and creating the things that I really love. And working with the things and having conversations with the things that I really love. Like, so, beside other than the books you just mentioned and my new found work on Unico, the new Unico, I also work for Charles Schulz Creative Associates, which is basically Peanuts. So, I work for, I work there as a studio writer, and I work over at Schulz as well. So I get to interact with comics in that way too, from a different kind of angle, where I'm not really working or creating my own stuff, but I'm also working with an icon of American comics. So yeah, I mean, my life is just steeped in it, and I'm just I mean, to be honest, I'm just grateful to be able to do so. It's a wonderful time.
I didn't realize that about Schulz, and it's funny because I don't know if you see this. I have your anime and manga guide behind me here.
Yeah.
On top of a Schulz book, it's from the curator of the museum, and he put together a book. It's Schulz in 100 images.
Yes, something. Of course. Yeah. Oh, yeah. We know that one. Yeah. Because we basically work across the street from the museum in a little office in Santa Rosa, and so it's basically like it's remote work now. So I mostly work from home, but at the same time, it's I go by the office every pretty often, and that museum is fantastic, and the curators there are amazing.
I thought I was already envious of your lifestyle, but it just quadrupled. I can't believe I'm more envious now than I was before we started. It's incredible. Okay. So I want to ask you a question that I normally save for like later in the interview. Since you are essentially doing the same things for work and fun, how do you avoid burnout? Like, are you into Sports. What do you do that isn't this thing that can help you avoid getting burnt out on?
Well, I do. That's such a good question, actually, because yeah, I mean, a little background on me is, I spent the last 12 years essentially in a cave, because when you're kind of aspiring to write in any way or do any kind of art, as I know most of my artist friends, and writer friends know, it can take a while. Like, you have those people who, they come out and they come right out of the gate and they have a big success, and it's rare, but that does happen once in a while, but that's, again, very rare. And so, for a lot of my writing career, I was just trying to find work, to be honest, and find, like, and write as much as I could, and find my interests and write within my interests and try to expand upon that. And the last few years, things really started to click in that way, and I started to be able to really do a lot of really wonderful work. But then I got to the point where I had said, I was, I'd been so used to famine for so long. When it was a feast, I took on everything that I possibly could.
Yeah.
I ended up in a little bit of a gambit because of it, to the point where I was like, oh my God, okay, now I have to really avoid a burnout, and I have to make sure that I had to learn for the first time how to say no to things, how to be able to create a functional schedule. And the things that I do now then, so things are kind of starting to stabilize in that manner. I have Unico coming out this year, but I don't, like, last year I had 5 books coming out, and it was just a lot of, it was a lot going on. So, what I do to avoid burnout is I go on a lot of walks. I walk a lot. I walk and I listen to books. I listen to music. I listen to podcasts. I love walking. I, also exercise and do other kinds of things like that. I also am a huge horror movie head. So I spend a lot of time, which I don't really have anything in. I don't really write much horror at the moment, but I love horror. So I spend, as odd as it might seem, one of my outlets is watching horror movies. And so it just kind of takes me out of everything that I'm doing and makes me feel, just kind of, there's a nostalgia in there and something that reminds me that I've been doing, that I've loved for a long time. And it really pulls me out of whatever, furious cycle of work that I'm involved in.
Just quickly, it's sort of horror, sort of sci-fi. It's a blend. Have you seen Scavenger's Reign?
I haven't seen it, but it's on the list. Like, there's it's definitely on the list. Yeah, I can't wait. I've heard
Highly recommended.
It's absolutely incredible.
And I keep talking about it because now that Netflix picked it up from HBO, it's like, we need to get season 2.
Yeah,
so come on.
Well, absolutely. No, I can't wait. No, I'm going to watch. I'll try to contribute to the cause. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, and one thing I forgot to say too is I build things. I haven't had time in the last year because I've just been so, everything with Unico has been kind of consuming. But I build dioramas. I do Legos. I do all sorts of stuff like that. And that for me is really calming. Just to zone out and make something with my hands that doesn't involve, sitting and typing in a computer, can be really helpful, because it's cognitive, it's tactile, without being, without just involving just writing.
That's great. I haven't got that answer. Most people say video games.
Oh, yeah, I like those too. Okay. And those. Right. And video games, yeah.
Well, look, I love that you are all at once. I'm just going to say the authority on the topic and a contributor and creator as well. So tonight, considering some of my audience may not be as familiar with these topics as you and I are, there's a real opportunity to bring on some new readers, right? To get some converts. And so please, as we talk about this stuff, feel free to talk about it as casually as you like or as instructively as you like.
Sure, absolutely.
But let's go back. I want to get a bit of an origin story. When did you first realize your passion for comics and animation, whether American or Japanese? And did you know early on that you wanted to contribute to the medium as a creator?
So I would say that it happened really, really organically before I even knew I wanted to do anything. I've been writing ever since I was really young. I've been writing stories. I tried to write my first novel at like 10 or 11, and it was a complete and total knockoff of The Lord of the Rings and the Short Sword of Shannara, and it was called The Ring of Shanalakaz, and it was like a complete blend of these two fantasy novels, and just that. So it was just like, but I loved writing from a pretty young age. I didn't know I wanted to do it professionally though until a little bit later on. But when I was growing up in the 90s, because I'm 42, so I was born in 1982, we got hit with a big wave of anime in the mid 90s. It just started to really come through. For me, it was going down to Suncoast Video and getting as many VHS tapes as I could afford. I remember, and it started because I believe it was Fist of the North Star. Tokyo Ken, that was the first the film version of Fist of the North Star. Reached was it my friend had a VHS of it, and I think I was like 13 or 14, and it was incredibly bloody and incredibly exciting and incredibly and the animation was just so adult and so thorough and so full of movement and verve, and I was transfixed. I didn't even know what had happened to me, and then from there I saw Akira, and I got into other anime as well. I really started watching a show called Ranma One Half, which is about a boy who is practicing martial arts in a secret spring with his father, and they fall into one of the different strings. His father becomes a panda when he's hit with cold water, and then the boy Ranma becomes a girl when he's hit with cold water, and then when he's hit with hot water he turns back into a boy. And so it's like this whole martial arts silly comedy series, and these things, and then series like Evangelion, and which were really groundbreaking and kind of terrifying. These things just opened my mind to the fact that animation was a broader category than I could have possibly understood. Now, at that time period, though, manga wasn't really available. There wasn't a lot of manga around, at least for me. I just didn't have access to much of it. There were a couple things. I remember my first one I got a hold of was Battle Angel Alita, which was made into a Gun, which was made into the Japanese version, which was made into a film by a film adaptation that was kind of surreal by James Cameron a few years back. And that kind of got me, was probably my first manga. But it really wasn't until like my maybe mid 20s that I really started to get into it, because I went to a comic shop when I, in the Bay Area, when I got out to the West Coast. Grew up in Colorado. There was a store that had just specialized in, just had so much manga, and I got hooked. Like I read everything that I possibly could. And it was through that I discovered the works of Osamu Tezuka, who is the creator of Astro Boy and the character that the book that we're putting out in about 2 weeks. He also created that character, which is Unico. So, that's kind of what I started to get into. As far as like how my writing worked into it, I started to I was either going to become, I had two choices. I was going to become a translator. I wanted to try to become a translator at the UN. I don't know. That was what I was obsessed with, because I really like language. And so I was, going to become a translator at the UN, and I was going to go to school for translation. I was going to go a lot more of a windy path than to become a writer. And so I decided that I was going to become a writer, and I started writing my first novel. And my first novel turned out to be about superheroes. And from there, I started to realize just, how much I grew up with comics, and I wanted to write comics. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to work on comics. So, long story short, through a series of people, I ended up going to the first comics master's program in the United States at California College of the Arts, the MFA in comics, where it was kind of like a crash course in comics technique, comics history, all these different aspects of the of making, you know, comics. And that kind of galvanized my whole career, and I was able to start publishing. After I finished that program in 2015, I published my first comic in 2016, and
Wow.
since then it's been kind of a gradual climb up, you know, through publishing with different publishers and different kinds of work, and working with different artists, and yeah, so it's kind of it led all the way up to this point now, where I've and you know, I'm not sure if you want me to go into this, but like a few years back, I started, you know, working with companies from Japan, and so that might work into another question you might have, but essentially that was the way that I kind of was able to really take my passion for manga and make it into something that I could actually contribute to and participate in.
You know that you were watching some great stuff growing up. I had now I was born in 74, and
Okay.
in the first and closest thing to an anime that I recall was Speed Racer, back when we were still calling it Japanimation.
Yeah.
And which I hate. It was all I had as a kid, but
Right.
anime is so appropriate. And
Japanime. Yeah.
yeah, and we had you know, like re-edited Voltron and stuff like that. But and here I'm gonna try and I'm gonna try and use something I learned from your book. I believe Speed Racer would be, because like you said, it's its own like sort of category of animation, but there are subcategories, right? And I think that Speed Racer would be categorized as a shonen anime.
Yeah,
Is that right?
I think it definitely be shown. I think it's probably one of the first shonen anime. Yeah,
Which
which basically,
translates to boy.
boy, it's basically teens, like
Right.
teen boy, like, you know. So, and you know, and everybody, all genders read shonen, but it's more just like, you know, all the action manga you can think about right now, that you probably like Attack on Titan or Jujutsu Kaisen or My Hero Academia, everything that a lot of the things that most teenagers and a lot of adults are reading is in that category of shonen.
So, you know, coincidentally, I lived in Longmont, Colorado for 23 years.
Oh
Um,
wow, really?
yeah, and you know, my shop was Time Warp Comics in Boulder, but Mile High Comics was like, it's like a
That was my
legendary thing. And just throwing that out there in case you've also been to Mile High
I
Comics.
used that was my shop. I used to go to
Yeah.
Mile High. That's because I grew up in Arapahoe County, which
Oh,
in the Centennial, and so it was
okay,
on the
yeah.
southern side. So it's like, you know, so I just basically grew up going to Mile High with my friends, and yep, I remember that comic shop so well. So
That's
that's
cool.
like where I got all my great, you know, all the great stuff. I remember when Superman died and Bane broke Batman's back. And that was the
That's
everything
great.
was happening in Mile High.
So, do the terms age appropriate, meaning comics and animation that are made for a certain age, like teens, does that also mean, and I know the answer to this, but you know, people are always saying, "Oh, comics are just for kids, cartoons, that's kid
Mhm,
stuff." But like
mhm.
when it's age appropriate, like when it has that label, does that also mean that it was dumbed down or simplified in any way? Or is it like, you know, it's age appropriate, but look, everyone's going to love this? Cuz I say what you want about Harry Potter, people told me, "Oh, you're going to love Harry Potter, adults love it too." And I was like, nah, I don't really feel like it is for
Yeah,
adults. Not me anyway. But this stuff, it's a lot different because it is animated. It is for teens, but I feel like it's not dumbed down or simplified. But how what's your take on it?
well, so I think what you're really digging into, like, a, you know, a conversation that I think is so salient and almost like evergreen in American entertainment as a whole. Because I mean, like, you know, I was actually talking to one of my friends about this earlier today, but like in Japan, you really don't have kids comics. You know, you have stuff like you have Doraemon, and you know, you have some really instructional stuff, but really, like, kids just read up. They read above their grade. So like, you know, so you'll have kids that are, you know, probably, you know, in the United States we consider it very much not age appropriate, to where, because I mean what happened, and a lot of that is because, for example, Dragon Ball Z, which is a beloved, you know, anime series that I'm sure most of you have heard of, most of your listeners have heard of. uh the reason why it was not you're not able to show it in the United States or reading in the United States is because it will show the main character, who's a little kid Goku, naked, running around because he's a little kid, and in Japan, like, nudity isn't considered to be as big of a deal because, I mean, families bathe together and stuff like that. There's a lot of it just you show it's not as shameful in that way to depict people like taking a bath, for example, and being nude. um and so, especially, like, little kids and stuff like that, but in the United States that would never fly. And some of the series that are super popular now, like My Hero Academia or Demon Slayer, or things like, or Attack on Titan, there's a lot more violence, a lot more, there's sexual innuendo, and actual, sometimes a little bit of actually beyond innuendo. So it's like, that's what really causes that separation. That's what causes that distinction for people in the United States. So it's really just like, but what I think is that, we're not going to, the United States is going to be the country that it is. And we're not going to stop looking at, looking for age appropriate books for kids. That's just the way that we look at the world, and we're not going to be Japan. And so the thing is, that's why I think that there is a way to take the things that people love about manga and make manga for a younger audience. So, make something that doesn't necessarily deal with heavy violence, or doesn't deal with sex, for example, in a really sensible way. And a lot of Tezuka's stories actually, were like that. They were really accessible for a large age groups. They weren't like, especially the stories for kids like Astro Boy and Unico, and stories like that. They were very accessible for young readers because they didn't have a lot of, suggestive, material. So while I think that this is just like, and I think this is why, for example, I went to the American Library Association conference recently, where I was meeting with a lot of librarians. And all the librarians are like, God, all our kids want to read is manga. That's all they want. But we can't give it to them because if their parents will come and they'll yell at us. Like, they'll be like, why'd you give my 8-year-old kid, this comic that's clearly above their age group? So this is kind of, in the way, what we're doing is trying to provide, that kind of level of excitement and twists and turns and verve that you really expect from manga. For kids that can actually get into it and dig into it within their age group. So I mean, I think it's just, it's always going to be an ongoing conversation for a long time, but it's one that I would love to see evolve. So
and so there are cultural differences for sure. How about when it comes to the production of manga and anime, and not just like how it's produced, but why, and at a rate and a volume? Because
yes,
it's way more appreciated in Japan than it is here, even though that appreciation is definitely growing, like you said. But so what are the primary differences in terms of like how and why it's generated?
Well, it's generated. Well, first of all, it's very demanding. Comics is demanding in general, and then Japanese comics manga can be very demanding. There's schedules that are, you have larger groups of people working on one book. So you might have a person at the top who's, drawing it, and then you give different duties out to different artists. So, for example, somebody will be doing the backgrounds, other people will be doing the screen tones. So you have, like, that's why when you're looking at a manga that's been, somehow put, in the last 2 weeks, they put out these beautiful pages with these gorgeous backgrounds and that are, immaculately rendered. That's because you have some person, in a corner, drawing these these rendered backgrounds, and that's their one job throughout the whole entire process. So in some ways, it's just taking the medium more seriously. I think is part of it. Just like the fact that there's a huge, like, okay, so for example, another big difference is when you are working with editors in Japan. I have, for example, a fantastic editor on Unico, who's David Saylor, who's the who's at Scholastic. But like, you know, I will say that in comics in general in the United States, a lot of editors are more hands off. They're kind of like, you know, okay, well, as long as you stick to the following things, it's kind of, you know, it's up to you. You kind of, you know, we're not gonna really interfere too much. But in Japan, it is way more rigorous. An editor gets in there and says, no, 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 none of this will work. Like, you know, you have to figure out how to capture people's interest and hook people in a really, you know, swift and you know, in a way that's so for in Japan, if you vote, people will vote on whether or not a comic gets to go forward. So, for example, those big phone booths that people see, those big, you know, they're you know, those big magazines, Shonen Jump is probably one that a lot of people have heard of. You know, they contain a lot of different stories in them. They contain different, like, you know, kind of like we would have in the U.S. with weekly floppy comics. You know, they stick them all into these big phone books, and they're all in black and white, and or, you know, on newsprint basically, and you get to read a chapter of your favorite ongoing story, or one that you might be interested in. Now, when a manga creator is starting out and they're reading these and they're writing these or creating these stories, if the readership does not like the story, the story will get canceled. So they actually, like, I think they used to do cards. I think now it might be electronic, but you used to send in your cards to say, like, you know, whether you like or dislike a series. So you have to get past so many hurdles to get to the point where your work is assembled into a tokuban, like, which is what the books that you think of when you see on the shelf. And then once you're to that point, you pretty much keep on going forward. But, you know, it's pretty precarious for, you know, to think of the fact that, you know, this is your shot. You know, you have a shot to, you know, to get your story out there. And I've talked to, you know, manga creators in Japan who are like, you know, who are like, yeah, just like, I've had 2 series canceled, you know, like before they even got put into, you know, tokuban, you know, before they even got into the shelves. And so it's like, it's a little bit more demanding in that regard, and a little bit more, there's a higher bar to clear. This is not to say that everything's perfect in that industry, because there's a lot of problems in terms of, you know, overwork. And we had Akira Toriyama recently who died from essentially very young from you know, essentially death from overwork. The creator of Dragon Ball Z, Tezuka himself died young. You know, so there's this notion that these people that there's a lot of overwork problems, but what is the really beautiful thing about it is that they're really taken seriously, and the stories are, there's a very high bar for creating a very good story with a lot of twists and turns that really captures your attention. It's really focused in on that. Is your story compelling? And, you know, and that's something that I think that in the US, some comics can have a hold on that, but you know, we had that kind of golden age of Image Comics for a little while where things were really, you know, we had Saga, we had a lot of high concept, you know, story driven books that were coming out, but that's not always a priority in the US. So what you're getting, when the promise that you get from a really good manga series is that's really going to, like, you know, entertain you. You know, that's the idea. You're really going to escape. You're really going to be entertained. You're going to, like, latch on to really exciting characters and really exciting storylines, and you're going to be invested in it because it's good. And that's kind of that's the promise. And honestly, often it's fulfilled. And to add to that, there's so much manga for everyone that it's like, you know, there's every single, you know, type of reader, every single, you know, whether you want sports manga or whether you want manga, romance manga, or, romance between men manga, or romance between women manga, or romance or action manga, or fantasy manga, or manga about cooking, or about playing chess, or like there's manga for everything. There's any kind of topic you can imagine, somebody's working on a manga about it. And that's amazing to me.
I describe Drops of God to people.
Drops of God is a great one.
And
Absolutely.
they're, I'm like, yeah, it's about wine. And they're like, really? A comic book about wine? I'm like, not just that, but they'll mention an actual vineyard and their sales will go up.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
that's a big
That's a
influence.
big thing. Exactly.
Like, wow. So you're right. I mean, there's something for everybody, but the importance of these things are so much more than just, oh, it's a fun story. Anyway, next month, something new.
Yes.
They're trying to produce like getting your story cut from that giant anthology. That's got to be tough, because they're not just writing something they hope people will like. They're writing something that it almost needs to be transformational for the creator and the reader alike. It needs to be something that's going to catch on and be meaningful, not just a throwaway, right?
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly what it is. And it's like, it has to be a meaningful, it has to be meaningful to both the reader and the creator. And it has to be salient enough that it stays. Like, it's just like, it's like one of those, it's just, for lack of a better phrase, they don't mess around. There's just
Right.
there's just like the sense that, if you're going to be creating a manga series, like, the ones that you see that go get to the shelf, like, they've been through hell to get there. And like, it doesn't mean they're all good. Not all of them you're going to like, so they might not be good at all, but enough people were able to chime in and say, I like what you're doing, to allow it to go forward. So it's almost more reliant on readers in a way. Like, you have that connection with readers that you don't necessarily have in the US. I mean, in the US you have reviewers and you have people who read and review, but the idea of like kind of your average reader, just your person sitting home, is going to go buy a comic and read it at home, with manga, there's the ability to actually engage with it and say, for a normal reader to say, I didn't really like that too much. I'm going to give it a vote that I don't think it's not going to get my vote of confidence. And then there'll be another one and be like, wow, I love that book. That was so cool. A+, so it's like, and then the publisher will look at that and they'll be like, oh, okay, well, that one's going up and that one's going down. And so it's like, it's very, I love that sense of kind of community, and it turns the writing into the creating of a manga into something that's far more, like you're saying, the contract between the writer or the creator of the manga and the reader. And not to mention that a lot of manga artists don't show their face. A lot of people, they go under a different name, or they do interviews in a mask or something like that. That's partly a cultural thing, and then partly because the idea that it's about the work itself as opposed to the person, which is an interesting just way of looking at, I think, storytelling in general.
Yeah, like the artist for Unico, Giri that's a unit. That's two people, right?
Two people. They live inside two women who live in Saitama, Japan, which is outside of Tokyo. They're really great people and wonderful artists, and they don't allow for photographs. So there's one photograph of them that leaked out at a show once, but they're like, after that, like, no more. So like they so they'll do signings and stuff. They're like, no photos, like no photographs, no phones, because they just don't want that to be part of their image. They'd rather have the art stand for itself. And so
okay, you've mentioned Osamu Tezuka. Is that how you were saying it, Tezuka?
It's actually, so many people, it's amazing because everybody thinks it's Tezuka. It's actually Tezuka.
Tezuka, okay.
Yeah, it's Osamu Tezuka. Yeah.
I call him God of Manga, which is what people refer to him as, right?
Yeah,
He
yeah,
is known as, I mean, you say Astro Boy, and to me, I'm like, it's the guy that created Astro Boy, whereas some people may be like, okay. And so, likewise, when it comes to Unico, there are different types of people. There are people who go, okay, sounds interesting. What's it about? And there are people like me who are like, okay, yeah, I know of this because I'm into manga and anime, and it's at least in
sure.
my peripheral, and I've probably seen it, and it's blurred because I've seen everything.
Hmm.
And then there are people, and this is arguably a much larger percentage worldwide. There are people who are totally freaking out when news broke of this new project, right? Of Awakening.
Yes.
Can you please explain why Unico and this new book are such a big deal? And like, I how do you get the opportunity to do this for one, right? Because this has got to be like dream project, and you were saying your 12-year-old self would be freaking out. I know your adult self should be freaking out, but also like, so explain why it's a big deal, how you got the project, and I'm dying to know, how do you bear the weight of what must be a massive responsibility, because you cannot. Now look, I read it and I'll talk about my thoughts on it, but you did not get it wrong. But how do you bear that weight?
Well, it's you know, it's actually a great question, and when I think about it a lot, I think that first of all, I see it as a responsibility. So I see it as something that is not necessarily something I'm just. I see myself as beholden to a legacy. So so when I am working on this series, I am hoping that I'm working on it to homage Tezuka Sensei, to homage the god of manga, and it's something that it's also part of. So Tezuka himself, which one of the things I really love about him most is that he saw comics as kind of an international language. So he saw them as a way in which people could connect through cultures cross-culturally and such through the language of comics. He really believed that. He believed in collaboration, and he believed in and he retold stories from the Western canon very often. He did his own versions of like things, books like War and Peace and things like that. Or sorry, Crime and Punishment, not War and Peace, Crime and Punishment. So he would do his own versions of these stories, and and it was something that he didn't consider to be taboo or strange, because for him that was like the joy of creation, of making work, is to be able to collaborate and to share things with other people. And so and Tezuka Productions in Japan actually carries forward his vision in that way. So for example, when I first brought the idea to them of pitching to Unico, which I'll get into how that happened in a second. They were they to my great surprise, they really loved it, and then they kind of allowed us to really do kind of what we wanted to do. The only thing that they wanted us to keep in mind were that we keep to the spirit of Tezuka. So we keep themes and to what he believed in as a person and a humanitarian, and all these different parts of him that were really important. So you have to understand. It's like the idea of like you have to understand the work. You have to understand what he was trying to do, and if you can understand. And I'm not saying that I'm not trying to be arrogant in any way, but it's more just like the idea of like trying to understand his work is the way that you can work with his work. And so like, that's why they were, that's why so recently, and I think it will come out in about in sometime in the near future, we received a letter from Tezuka's daughter, Rumiko Tezuka. I think it's his eldest daughter. And she basically wrote us a long letter, and enshrined in that letter was, I think that the person who would have loved this project most would have been Tezuka himself. And so I was like, okay, like, so I was just like, I was
Wow.
like, be still my heart. It was like one of those moments that I was like, okay, so, let's just keep on, you know, trying to make this work. And so I think that part of it is just keeping, for me, it's just keeping my head down and making sure that I continue to work, to do the work that, hopefully Tezuka himself would have appreciated.
Um, it's you have a real consideration for the source material, and I think maybe what I'm hearing is that it needed to be a fan that could take on a fan of that source material, the original work that could take on this project, but not in a way that would be like um fanboy, for a lack of better term, like somebody who's just going to do like fan fiction or extended universe stuff, but like it because like you call it do you call it a reimaginating or a
Yeah, yeah,
reimagining or
yeah,
because
imagining, yeah,
like how drastic though, because look, I'm the kind of guy who when
yeah,
I love when things are adapted from something to a comic, but when it goes the other way, I'm usually like, I'll always have the comic. Take any liberties you want. I don't
yes.
care. I always have the comics. But like in this case, like I'm wondering if you're gonna essentially adapt a comic into something that's considered reimagining, what sort of liberties do you take when the need for a deep consideration of the source material is so vital?
Well, so the thing that's super exciting is that Tezuka Productions in general, they are so supportive of of expanding and recreating and reimagining. So, for example, the things that are important to Tezuka Productions are that we, of course, stay on model with the characters and make sure they don't look like completely outside of their design specifics, design specs. But another thing is just looking at the for lack of a better word, the spirit of the narrative. So, like, I mean, so for example, have you read Pluto, the Pluto series by Naoki Urasawa?
It would have been a long time ago, but
So it's basically it's
and not
been
all of it.
right. It's been made into an anime recently that was on Netflix that was really well done, and it's Naoki Urasawa. For those who might not know, is considered one of Japan's like modern great cartoonists. He did a great series called 20th Century Boys, and he's also done this series called Monster that was also made into an anime. And Pluto was a reimagining of a Tezuka arc of basically from Astro Boy, in which Astro Boy takes on this robot that's going around destroying a bunch of other robots called Pluto, and he made it into a modern detective story. And it takes a lot of like visual liberties and a lot of character liberties and things like that, but it's so true to the original spirit of the story that you feel like you're in Tezuka's world because you feel the love for the work and the love for the characters. I think that what maybe what you're pointing to, what I think that I notice as well is that there's a lot of the time, especially in the US and probably elsewhere too, but I think especially here, we like to reboot and reboot and reboot and
Right.
reboot. We like to take like, okay, it's Ghostbusters, but instead of these guys, it's these guys. And it's like that's kind of we just like to mix up the formula and see what happens. And and sometimes actually when we do it with Japanese stuff, like people will just want to get the license. They'll just want to get the character and they'll just do their own thing with it. They'll completely and totally just ignore any of the original work and just kind of go off in a completely different direction, and often that doesn't do super well. So I think again, what those things really miss is like you're saying, somebody who really cares about the work, the story, like somebody who really thinks that it's necessary to bring it to a new generation of readers, you know um and like it's just something that so for example, even with Unico, there have been a lot of pitches for Unico. A lot of people want to do things with Unico, and I see people saying like, well, we're just making My Little Pony or something like that. make it a My Little Pony story, and like it's just like My Little Pony, and I'm like, I don't think you've read the story. I don't think you've read the book. You know, I don't think you know what it's about, or seen the films or whatever, or what have you, because you know you would know if you read them that it's not My Little Pony. It's a deceptively complex story, and you know, and that's the and so yeah, it's an exciting thing that happens with a work like this where we get to create something entirely new while homaging uh, the existing material, and also working with Gurihiru, who is their Japanese artist team, and they grew up with Tezuka. And everybody who aspires to be an artist in Japan has to grow up to be a cartoonist in Japan has to grow up with Tezuka. He's considered to be like, again, the god of manga. So these are people who like they grew up, with him everywhere. He was all over the place. And like they even when I first pitched them on the story, they turned it down. When I first pitched them, when I first pitched Gurihiru and asked them to be in the project, they were like, no, it's too big. We can't work with Tezuka's work. We can't do that. And then we talked to them more about it, and they realized they were going to be able to kind of have some liberty. And then also they were going to be able to do so with the blessing of Tezuka Productions. They ended up signing on, and that ended up really adding a gigantic element of that I can't possess to the project as well. I think that's also important. Like if you're going to work on a project that comes out of Japan, you should work with somebody in Japan. Like so, that's my personal thought on, like, don't take it and make it just two Americans making
yeah, because then it's like, here's the American version.
Yes,
and that's not the point. But point. In collaboration is key. You were saying it's very important, and it's what the creator would have wanted. So talk about the collaboration with the artist a little bit. Okay, is this like stay in your own lane territory, or did you give them like a very descriptive panel by panel, and it's got to look just like this, or did you meet and talk about it and spitball and what was it like getting those pages? Because not only is it a technical feat, it's some of the most expressive artwork. Like, okay, just let me take a second here. People might see this book and think My Little Pony, not for me. You would be making a huge mistake if you thought that.
Oh,
I read it. Not only is it truly epic, it's over 200 pages, and I just burned through it and then spent like 4 times the amount of time just absorbing it, just going back over it and looking at it. It was beautiful. I could not put it down. It was amazing. I laughed. I teared up. I was frightened. More than once, I was reminded of various pets that I've had in my life, looking at the characters. Like it worked very well on so many different levels. Above all, I was absolutely delighted from cover to cover. I would describe it as this refreshingly positive story, as if it's like being in a room and they're just pumping oxygen into the room. That's what it felt like when I was reading the book, and I couldn't get enough. And thank God it ended with to be continued. And you can talk about the future if you want to. I don't know how early it is to talk about this stuff, but like it would be a huge mistake for somebody to skip over this or misinterpret what this book was. It is one of the most thoughtful and considered stories I've read ever, not just in comics. And
that's a huge compliment. Thank you very much.
Well, but that's due to the writing and also the way the art is absolutely legible, absolutely. Right? It makes total sense. The pacing is pitch perfect, but it's expressive and it really makes you feel. And so, like, how did you go about generating that? Was it very natural? Did it take a lot of work? And like, what was it like getting those pages back? You must have been flipping out.
every single page that I receive back, and this is considering this is also in the moment, this is now too, every page that I receive is just jaw dropping. I look at everyone and I'm like, wow. I look at the colors, I look at the composition, I look at how they've interpreted the my words, and put their own. And so to answer your question from earlier, is it just a stay in your lane thing? Absolutely not. Like I've definitely, I go to Japan pretty often, and whenever I'm there, I go have dinner with Gurihiru, and we sit down and we kind of just we catch up, and I consider them friends, and like and my philosophy on working with artists in general is that you really can't dictate exactly what's going to happen. Of course, I have the page set up in the dialogue and the story, and that's not what I mean by saying what's going to happen. I mean like more like they're going to draw what they're going to what they think what they should draw, and if it's different from what I described in the panel breakdowns, that doesn't bother me in the slightest, and it never will. They are consummate professionals. They know exactly what they're doing, and they're absolutely genius. So it's like, so for example, if I send a script in, and I usually just do panel breakdowns, panel 1, describe what's happening, dialogue, panel 2, describe what's happening, dialogue, that's my way of working. I'm pretty direct and I break down everything. I give large descriptions, so I give enough information. I create Pinterest boards for visual inspiration and things like that as well. But for example, if they see a page where I put 5 panels and then another page that has 7 panels, and they're like, actually, we're going to combine these 2 pages together, and we're going to switch it around a bit and do this whole entire thing. I'm like, that's brilliant. Like, absolutely, let's do that. So it's like, so I've never gotten to a point with them where I've been like, that's not a good idea. Like they just know what they're doing. I don't have to, so, we really have a really great cooperative, relationship in that way, where we're able to, really build off each other's strengths and make it through, and it functions. So I think it's all about communication. So it's all about how you communicate visual language, which is something it takes. I think that's the one thing that a comic writer can try to study most, is how to communicate visual language. And
yeah, I mean, if you're going to hire people for their expertise, let them be experts, right? Like, let them be the experts. Okay, I can honestly, I could talk to you about this for another 10 hours. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. I could too. Absolutely.
Do you have a favorite scene?
I have a favorite scene. Yes. So there's so the thing in Unico is that there's 2 separate storylines going on. There is the main storyline, which is kind of Unico going through trying to discover trying to solve a problem in his immediate purview. And then there's a larger narrative of this character called the West Wind, who's one of my favorite characters, attempting to break Unico's cycle of forgetfulness and his curse, essentially, and save him, and be right or wrong in the universe as well, with this horrific Venus character who's chasing him through time and space. So in the scene, in one of the scenes, Venus has to go to a place where the very foundation of knowledge is kind of assembles into these mountains that go on forever, and she's going there to find this flower that could break Unico's curse. And the only thing she has to be able to do is remember her name. And I love the scenes with her trying to remember her name, and I won't give away exactly what happens, but at the same time, that to me is something that I find really personally moving. And so in the way that Gurihiru drew it is just breathtaking. The way that they actually were able to take these wild ideas that I was jotting down on a piece of paper about mountains of knowledge and being able to put that into an actual tangible, tangible, physical, beautiful looking place just blew my mind. And yeah, that's probably my favorite. It might not. I think there's going to be people who have a lot of different favorite scenes, which is really great because there's so many different wonderful things that happen. But just that one always stood out for me about how they were able just to do that from and put together such a beautiful, haunting place.
I think for me, Chloe really stole the show a lot. I love that character so much. There's a recurring line that I really like. I have a favorite panel.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, there was one panel where I was like, "This is perfect." It's so perfect. It's where Unico is suddenly on a busy city sidewalk and running while also, I think, hiding his face. And to me, it was like, my dog does that all the time. I have a tripod, and she is self-conscious about it. Like, she knows she's missing a leg, right? And so occasionally she'll sort of hide her face while moving through a crowd of people. Like, I'm not here, don't look at me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a great one.
It was touching. I laughed and I felt like crying at the same time. And anyone who knows me knows that's not easy to do. But
well,
leave it to a comic panel.
And part of that is so such an is such a testament to Gurihiru's art, because they are so good with movement and with animals in particular. Like they are incredible, and that makes sense because what they study is both Tezuka and Disney. And so, you know, the way that they, you know, capture animal movement is just phenomenal.
Well, it's a huge achievement. The book is called Unico Awakening. It's out officially August 6th, and folks can hit the links in the description of this video to follow social media accounts to get updates, and also Samuel. And I just cannot recommend it enough. It is a true masterpiece. Like you really nailed it in every way. It's such a very special thing. I'm so glad to have read it. There is a very generous 30-page preview online. Like, I almost feel like I shouldn't be talking about this. Like, that seems like a huge, like, that's a massive preview. People could definitely check that out. It's only going to make you want to read the rest. And San Diego Comic-Con International is this week, this Thursday, July 25th, from, I believe this is Pacific time, 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. in room 28DE. You will be on a panel to celebrate the release of the book. And it's also a special panel. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. It's about, basically, it's a panel on, you know, the kind of the lasting legacy of and the future of Osamu Tezuka. And I am so excited. We're going to be talking with it's going to be moderated by Deb Aoki, who co-hosts the podcast Mangasplaining and is kind of a consummate manga professional. And we'll also have Ben Applegate, who's a really well-known translator who actually translated the original Unico from Japanese to English. So it's going to be a really fascinating conversation about the future of Tezuka and what that holds. We're going to also be showing some really actually some sneak previews from book 2 that I'm really excited about. So that's going to be really, really cool. And we're also going to be featuring some bunch of other Tezuka work, and it's just, come on down. It's going to be fantastic. Oh, and then after that, there's a signing. I'm going to be doing a signing from 3:30 to 4:30, I think, at the Sale Pavilion.
This is big. I have not ventured to an SDCC in a number of years. I used to go a lot, and then I was like, you know what? There's a lot of these with much smaller, more manageable crowds, but I'm jealous. I'm envious and jealous. This interview is kind of ruining me tonight. I'm going to try maybe I'll just go back and read Unico Awakening again and feel better about the whole thing. But Look, thank you so much for being here. I really do appreciate it. You have an open invite to come back on anytime and talk about any of this stuff, just casually or your next project. Like I said, I was so excited to see that it said to be continued. I cannot wait to get the news post Comic-Con. And I mean, I wish you the best of luck. Is there anything else that you want to plug or talk about before we wrap?
I mean, like, yeah, look forward to book 2. The book 2 announcement's going to be really great. We're so excited. I'm seeing it being done right now, and it's just it's spectacular. I also I'm pretty excited to say that I am nominated for an Eisner this year for a book that I put out in 2023 called Buzzing. And it's about a kid with OCD who plays role-playing games, and that's been nominated in the kids category for an Eisner with my co-creator Ry Hickman. So that's pretty cool. We're excited about that. Yeah, essentially that's what we got going on at the moment. I'm in the shadows working on a noir series, but we'll have that. There'll be word about that probably, a little bit more in the distant future.
Well, if you ever feel the need to unburden yourself and just let somebody know privately, I'm available. You just reach out. I'm there for you. No,
I love your shirt, by the way. Have you read the Batman manga?
Yeah. I loved it.
It's so good. Yeah.
It's great.
The new Batman Ninja anime that's going to be coming out looks spectacular.
Yeah. I mean, my thing is really to absorb as much material as possible, but I always find myself just rereading Lone Wolf and Cub and Akira over and over and over again.
That's all you need. That's the two best. Like,
there's a lot of them.
I mean, talk about if you want to. I know we got to end, but talk about if you ever really want to do like a master class in manga, read a Tezuka book called M.W. Mu, and then read Lone Wolf and Cub, and you'll pretty much get, if you study every panel, you can understand a lot about the medium.
Yeah, and you gotta love a book like Akira where they have a huge translation section in the back, and it's like page 4, panel 1, boom, page 3, panel 6. Pow, that kind of stuff. It's like I love that stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll read the whole thing.
The sound effect. Yeah, they also do that in I think they do that in the Nausicaa series too. In the Nausicaa books, they put the sound effect translations in the back, which are so wonderful. I love that.
Lone Wolf and Cub does the asterisk, like an editor's note, where there'll be like wind blowing and it's Japanese characters, and at the bottom it says swish.
That's right.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, it's so cool.
I love that stuff. It's just a whole nother layer of fun. But thank you so much for being here. I really do appreciate it. It's been great.
Talking, yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for everyone for watching. I hope we got some converts. Let me know if you do check it out on the Discord, on social media, wherever. You know where I'm at. We'll see you next time.
Don't miss, folks. He does not miss whatsoever. Oh my gosh. He don't miss, folks. He does not miss whatsoever.